Chapter 4. Black Widows and Soda Pop. Ray moved into the American Hotel before I could. I had to wait an extra month for my lease to be up at my studio in Hollywood. But that March, 1996, I rode my Vespa P200E into the Arts District. With a sleeping bag, a suitcase, an electric typewriter, and a boombox strapped to the luggage rack, ready to move into my room 214, directly above the stage of Al's Bar. My rent was only $235 a month, less than half of what I was paying in Hollywood. The day I arrived, there was a massive street fair happening right on the corner of Traction and Hewitt. A stage was built down the street from the hotel with live bands playing, food vendors, a beer garden, beautiful girls, scantily clad, smoking weed and drinking from red plastic cups filled with all manner of magical elixirs. The sun was low in the sky, making all the buildings a warm, glowing orange. I was 24 years old and had already lived in LA for 5 years, but this was the first time I had really felt like I had arrived. Ray greeted me at the front door of the hotel and helped me up to my room with my things. We dropped everything in the room and went back down to the festivities on the street. There were people everywhere. Loud, aggressive punk rock glaring between the buildings from the stage in the middle of the street. People strolling along the sidewalks with joints, beers, popcorn, hot dogs, and ice cream cones. Girls with red, flirty eyes and full lips passing by, glancing over their shoulders at us as we leaned on the corner, lighting a blunt that Ray had procured. We went into the beer garden on the corner and poured down one pint after another, burning down the blunt and laughing at how fucked up we were. It was glorious. I thought to myself, fuck, I'm never leaving this place. I found my nirvana. A cool neighborhood with live music and drink right under my feet, gorgeous tattooed girls at every turn, cheap rent, beautiful industrial vistas in every direction, untouched by the hoi polloi, unknown by and large by the masses. A dirty little secret that a scant few knew about, full of history, life, the down and out, the outcast. I was there to stay. We drank and smoked the afternoon away, met some girls at the bar, invited them up to my room, sat on the floor listening to music and passing a bottle around. Ray took his girl to his room while I got cozy with her friend. I fucked her all night and into the morning. I fell asleep next to her in my sleeping bag. When I woke up in the late afternoon, she was gone. I stretched out and yawned and chuckled to myself. What luck. What stupid, beautiful luck. I was never happier to be what I was, where I was, in all my days. Our plan in the beginning was to stay at the hotel for a few months, maybe a year, then move into one of the many lofts in the area once one opened up. We ended up staying at the American for 10 years. I didn't have to work much in the beginning to make rent, as cheap as it was. Ray had long since quit the Improv and had, for many years, made his living as a union lighting technician on motion pictures. He was very good at it, proficient, reliable, hard-working, and always willing to go the extra mile. He got on a good crew and was making money hand over fist. I, on the other hand, got by on side jobs. Telemarketing, painting someone's living room, working as a fill-in stagehand at the studios from time to time, making deliveries for them, or guarding a parking lot at a post-production house in Hollywood. Ray would get me gigs working as a walk-on background extra on some movies he worked on. He even attempted to get me into grip and electric work and becoming a member of his crew. I didn't like that much. It was more work than I was willing to put into any career. I would book shows for Al's Bar sometimes when they were short a band or two. I worked as a bouncer there as well when the regular one was sick. I scraped by. Then I scored a job at Bloom's General Store on the corner, which was great. I only had to walk downstairs to be at work. I sat behind the register reading magazines and talking to the regulars, getting to know them well. The cigarettes they smoked, their projects, their addictions, their tragedies, their hopes and dreams. It was almost like being a shrink sometimes, the way a bartender becomes a priest for drunks to confess their transgressions to. I held that position for 4 years. It paid well enough for me to move into one of the bigger rooms. Living so cheap paid off, not having to spend money on gas every day commuting to a job. Not that the Vespa took that much gas to begin with. The insurance for it was $100 a year, plus having owls downstairs, which residents were always allowed into for free to see shows, eating cheap at the Grand Central Market, buying loaves of bread for $0.25, dirt cheap produce, whole chickens for pennies on the dollar, and hot tortillas made fresh there in the market for 50 cents a bag. I was able to sock away some savings, start my band, playing no talent night on Thursday nights at Al's, cutting our teeth and honing our sound. That's around the time I started working for Raul, driving the wrecker. After working for him, I found an agency that hired temp truck drivers. You filled in for regular drivers who called in sick or got DUIs or had just quit suddenly. And you only worked when you wanted to. You can make your own schedule. You just had to give them notice. Perfect for me when the band had gigs in town or were booked on long tours. Doing this gave me a wealth of experience, driving all kinds of different trucks and trailers all over the trucking corridor. The trucking corridor is the area starting in Long Beach, San Pedro, the port of Los Angeles, the largest container port in North America, up through Lakewood, Compton, Linwood, Watts, Southgate, Downey, Maywood, Cudahy, Commerce, and into downtown Los Angeles. These small, incorporated cities were home to large industrial areas full of shipping terminals, warehouses, cold storage facilities, and rail yards. Your TVs, computers, refrigerators, washing machines, your food, furniture, the materials to build the house you're sitting in, and the chair you're sitting on, all, more than likely, made their way to you through the trucking corridor of Los Angeles. The agency would call you the night before and would confirm that you were available. They would tell you where to be and at what time, usually very early in the morning. Living in downtown, I was close to every freeway. The 10, the 101, the 5, the 110, the 710, and the 60. All no more than 5 minutes from the hotel. I get my assignment from the agency and head out the next day into the cold morning to work. One place that hired me a lot was the Smart & Final shipping terminal in Commerce, about 10 minutes from the hotel. I'd show up before dawn. They would assign me a truck for the day and hand me my bill of lading. I'd find my truck in the yard, usually a nice new one, easy to drive, with a clean cab, good heater, a CD player, an easy shifter, and good handling. Rare a lot of the time. Most places stuck you with shitty old trucks you were lucky to even get started, much less make it to your destination in one piece. I'd find my trailer in one of their many loading docks, hook up, and head out. The other thing I liked about working for them was that the routes were usually very short. I normally never had to drive more than 20 or 30 miles, and I never had to touch the freight. I just docked, opened the roll-up door, and one of the warehouse goons would take off the pallets with a forklift. Usually it was beverages, soda pop mostly, of every variety, every color. I'd stand next to the dock, watching all that sugary, carbonated water, brown, red, green, purple, blue, yellow, orange, caffeinated, syrupy, bubbly poison, shipping off into the supermarkets and gulped down by the gallons into the thirsty mouths of hardworking Americans everywhere. I'd have the warehouse goon sign the bill of lading, head back to the terminal, turn in the keys, and be home and back in bed by 10 in the morning. It was a pretty easy gig, one that I never minded being assigned to. But there were others that were nowhere near as congenial. I worked for a shipping warehouse in Vernon called TriStar Logistics. They assigned me a sleeper cab, which would have been a luxury, except it reeked of cigarettes to a nauseating degree. I had to open all the windows to air it out, and even brought a can of air freshener one day to gas the fucking thing with Flower Fresh deodorizing power, which hardly helped. It was filthy, The walls were stained with nicotine tar, food wrappers all over the floor, cigarette butts overflowing in the ashtray. Not a pleasant place to have to plant your ass all day. I pulled containerized loads out of the port for them. The Port of Los Angeles is a monolith of gargantuan scale. Huge shipping container freight ships line up in holding patterns off the coast, waiting to dock at one of the piers to get unloaded. They're enormous structures, floating cities, towering the height of 7 or 8-story buildings above the surface of the water. You pulled up to a concrete pylon at the gate, at the top of which was a TV screen with numbers displayed on it, and a speaker. When you pulled up, a voice asked you for your lading number. It was usually a black voice. "How you doing? Can I have your lading number, please?" I'd rattle off some numbers at the top of the page. "No, honey, that be your serial number. Ain't you been here before? The lading number being green," she'd exclaim in a loud, rude tone. I'd finally get it right and she'd let me pass, assigning me an empty chassis I would have to find, hook up to, and get in the queue with all the other trucks to have a container loaded onto it. All the dock workers were rude and nasty like the woman at the gate. They were union and can only get fired for gross negligence, if even for that. Many of them were ex-cons, with big brush mustaches like the outlaws from the Old West, and covered from their necks to their toes in prison tattoos. It was a dangerous place to work. Dock workers got killed all the time, crushed by falling containers or run over by stepping out from behind a blind corner in front of a truck. They all made good money but would blow it all on coke or women, taking them on lavish, drug-addled weekend romps in Vegas or Tijuana. They'd come back to work Monday morning, broke, hungover, and ornery. "TriStar driver, listen the fuck up, asshole," they'd shout. "You're next. When I give you the signal, you pull into that square number 5. You pop your brakes and don't release them until I tell you to. And once the container is loaded, you still don't move until I fucking tell you to. You got it, motherfucker?" I'd nod and give him the okay sign. "Don't okay me, motherfucker. Just do as you're told when you're told to do it," they'd snap. When he gave the signal, I would pull into square number 5 and pop on the brakes. Then, a massive green container crane, reaching 200 feet in the air, would grab one of the containers and slam it onto my empty chassis, shaking the entire truck and knocking me against the driver's side door. Then the dock worker would scream, "Go, go, go, you piece of shit!" And I'd take off. I'd have to take the container to a yard in Chino about 46 miles away. The containers were sealed, so you never knew what it was you were hauling. It could be canned goods, teddy bears, bottles of Drano, frying pans, machine guns, hula hoops, computers, lamps, lamb chops, gold bars, a nuclear warhead, or a family of Chinese stowaways. There was no way to tell. Once I got to the yard, we had to maneuver the containers into razor-thin stalls right up against one another, with no more than a couple of inches between them. The dimensions were hard to navigate, as the rows were small, barely big enough to angle them in. It was nerve-wracking. But it didn't end there. You had to go back and forth from the port, then back to the yard the whole day, about 8 to 10 times at least. It was grueling. For the next year or so, I hauled all kinds of freight, from auto parts, frozen foods, toys, office furniture, mattresses, tiles and flooring, lumber, kitchen appliances, empty milk cartons, and tires. Most days were a grind, lots of heavy lifting, smashed fingers and toes, hot sun, pouring rain, dense traffic, and long hours. Another place that hired me regularly was called Foamex. Now, I never gave it much thought before working for them, but foam is everywhere, in nearly everything. It's in your furniture, in the dash of your car, your keyboard, safeguarding your packages, in clothing, insulation. A huge industry, and industry has to be moved. And I moved a lot of foam around the Southland. It starts in its rawest form, huge blocks of it, 10 feet thick by 12 feet high. They look like giant cubes of tofu. They're smooth and a sort of creamy white. A few of them can fill a whole 53-foot trailer, floor to ceiling, wall to wall, front to back. We would haul it from their plant to different warehouses and factories that cut, shaped, and molded it into all sorts of things. It was important not to damage the foam when loading or unloading it, so using a forklift was not an option. The forks could pierce or scratch the surface of the cubes. Though they were quite heavy for one person, the best method of unloading was to scoot them to the edge of the trailer little by little and simply push them off onto the loading platform. Then the warehouse guys would prop them up on floor dollies and roll them to the cutting tables. I was unloading some in Compton one morning. I climbed into the trailer and squeezed my body between the wall of the trailer and the first giant cube of foam to get behind it and slide it onto the dock. It had been raining and some water had leaked into the trailer from a hole in its roof. It smelt dank and moldy in there, and it was a tight squeeze, stuffy and hard to move. I pushed my way behind the first cube, between it and the second one, sweating and trying to breathe as the foam pushed back, trapping my arms and legs together, pressing hard into my torso. I stabilized myself and pushed the cube forward with all my might, but it was jammed against the lip of the roll-up door and wouldn't budge. It was especially heavy because it was wet. I let the cube fall back in on me then because I couldn't support its weight. Just as I did, as the foam fell back, I glanced up to see a black widow spider the size of $50 right next to my head. Then total darkness. The foam engulfed us both, sealing us there together, airtight, between the two giant cubes. There, in the utter darkness, a black widow and me, under that weather-beaten trailer ceiling, under the blue corrugated roof of the loading dock, under the soaked palms and cloudy Compton skies, I felt the absurdity of our existence. How laughable, how strange, how bleak and beautiful it all was. I was too tired to fear the spider. I was at a certain kind of peace, of surrender. Was I doomed to labor and risk my neck like this to make a living for the rest of my days? How did I end up here, of all places, encased in foam, near the Black Widow's bite, in the middle of the ghetto, toiling shoulder to shoulder with a migrant worker, greasy hands, dirty face, coffee breath, bloated stomach, red eyes, heavy lids, road-weary, over-caffeinated, muddled, cloudy-brained, sprained, bruised, blistered and buried, spiritually, emotionally, and literally. I relaxed, suspended there in the darkness, trying to breathe. I heard some voices yelling out in Spanish and felt the dock workers reaching under the foam, pulling it off me and onto the dock. I fell to the floor of the trailer and felt the cold air reach my face and cool my lungs. I looked around for the Black Widow. It was nowhere to be found. Maybe it crawled away, escaped, survived somehow. I wondered then when I might make my escape. I would have to at some point if I hoped to survive.